Welcome to the Hindu Daily. We're diving straight into a geopolitical shockwave today, looking at the United Nations. It frankly seems to be gambling with global counterterrorism efforts. We're starting with the rather astounding revelation that back in June, Pakistan was appointed to two key UN roles, leading the Taliban Sanctions Committee and, get this, serving as vice chair of the Counterterrorism Committee.
It really is astounding. It feels like a profound failure of accountability.
Mhm.
And it really exposes, I think, some serious questions about the UN's moral compass.
Especially given the history.
Exactly. This move comes despite, well, decades of evidence and recent devastating attacks, the kind of terror infrastructure that hit Mumbai in 2008, Pulwama in 2019.
And that recent Pahalgam attack in April 2025, the one that triggered India's Operation Sindoor.
Right. When you look at those events, you realize these aren't just isolated incidents. They clearly rely on state-supported logistics. It's pretty hard to ignore.
And the diplomatic hypocrisy,
Yeah.
it's impossible to ignore, isn't it? You see designated terrorists like Hafiz Saeed seemingly walking free, appearing in public, maybe in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, even while Pakistan officially claims he's in custody. It's just a paper trail contradiction.
It goes beyond just contradictions, doesn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
just this year, the Pakistani government announced compensation 14 crore to families of terrorists killed in Indian strikes.
Including Masood Azhar's relatives.
The GEM chief?
Yes, including relatives of Masood Azhar. So here you have a government essentially equating terrorists with martyrs.
Yeah.
It directly undermines the goals of the Counterterrorism Committee itself.
How can the vice chair be a nation with such documented links?
That's the question. Documented tactical logistical links between its military, the ISI, and terror groups like Lati and GEM. It beggars belief, really.
So we're looking at a clear problem here of geopolitical maneuvering just overriding actual security imperatives. What about the process? How did the UN even let this happen? Well, that highlights a serious flaw in the vetting process, doesn't it? Think about the FATF gray list situation. Pakistan was removed back in 2022, despite, continued concerns about terror financing.
Right. Those concerns didn't just vanish.
Exactly. And that sends a powerful signal of leniency. What seems to be happening is that powerful nations are supporting this elevation for their own strategic interests.
And the message that sends.
The dangerous message for the rest of the world is that state-sponsored terrorism can essentially be overlooked, provided it's, packaged diplomatically enough.
So if Pakistan now has this seat at the table, influencing global policy, what's the immediate risk to India's security and its diplomatic standing?
Well, it presents immediate hurdles. Pakistan can now actively try to influence narratives, potentially undermining India's efforts to sanction specific Pakistan-based individuals. That's a big one.
And the Taliban Sanctions Committee role.
That's crucial, too. It gives them a platform to potentially derail India's growing, though still sensitive, diplomatic ties with the Taliban regime. Ties India has been carefully building, partly through humanitarian aid missions.
So they gain a sort of veto power.
In effect, yes, over regional counterterrorism discussions where they have a direct stake.
Okay, so India needs to shift gears, move to proactive diplomacy immediately, since these UN committees often operate by consensus.
That's key, the consensus part.
India needs to leverage its strong strategic alliances, especially among UNSC members, to prevent Pakistan from pushing biased agendas.
Absolutely. And it also requires constant monitoring, doesn't it? Pushing for transparent performance reviews of Pakistan's actual anti-terror actions, not just relying on their diplomatic paperwork.
That need for proactive engagement, it leads us quite neatly into a much more positive area, actually, of India's global influence, development, and partnership.
Yes, it's a good contrast. While the UN system shows its cracks in geopolitics, India is really positioning itself as a leader in what we call South-South cooperation.
Okay, so this is a major shift in focus. South-South and Triangular Cooperation, SSTC. Why is this suddenly so urgent right now?
Well, because we're frankly running out of time. We've only got about a third of the time left to achieve the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development Goals.
And funding is drying up.
And global development funding is shrinking, exactly. So SSTC, which really has its roots in the 1978 Buenos Aires Plan of Action Principles, solidarity, mutual respect, shared learning, it offers a vital complement to traditional Western aid.
Because it's more relevant.
It's often more cost-effective, easier to replicate, and crucially, it's contextually relevant because it uses solutions developed by the Global South for the Global South.
I think this is where India's own philosophy, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the world is one family, really takes concrete shape, isn't it? India's approach seems underpinned by its own quite unique experience.
Definitely. Becoming a food surplus economy while simultaneously managing one of the world's largest food safety nets gives India a lot of credibility here.
And it's been acting as a champion for the Global South.
A powerful one. Look at securing permanent membership for the African Union during its G20 presidency. That was a landmark achievement, a real boost for the Global South as a whole.
And practically,
Programs like the Indian Technical and Economic Cooperation, ITEC, they've been quietly building capacity in over 160 developing countries for years now. It's sustained work.
right, and we can't forget the digital footprint. India's digital public infrastructure, things like Aadhaar, UPI, these models are being actively promoted globally.
As replicable low-cost solutions, yes.
Yeah.
And since 2017, the India-UN Development Partnership Fund has also backed over 75 pretty transformative projects across 56 developing countries. It's quite extensive.
Is there a specific example that really stands out?
I think one of the clearest success stories highlighted in the sources is the 6-decade partnership with the World Food Program, the WFP. India basically served as a massive testing ground for WFP innovations.
Testing ground house.
Well, they co-developed solutions that can be replicated elsewhere. Things like the Anapurti, which is essentially a grain ATM. They worked on optimizing the national supply chain.
And specific programs.
Yes, successful women-led take-home ration programs, large-scale rice fortification projects. These are all highly scalable models that are incredibly relevant for food security challenges everywhere in the developing world.
Okay, transitioning now from those global partnerships, let's look inward at India's own society. We seem to be facing a domestic crossroads, really, focusing on the changing generational dynamic.
That's right. India is aging, and aging rapidly. Currently, about 10% of the population is over 60.
But that's set to jump dramatically.
Projected to be nearly 20%. That's 1 in 5 people by 2050. It's a huge shift.
And the Helpage India study you mentioned with over 5,700 respondents, it found a real paradox, didn't it?
It really did. On the one hand, young people are very quick to associate elders with positive things like wisdom, that was 51%, and respect, 43%, which sounds good. But in the same breath, they also view the elderly as lonely, that was 56%, and dependent, 48%. There's a disconnect there.
That emotional disconnect feels quite stark. And it's perfectly captured by that quote you highlighted from the elders. We are told the plan, not asked.
That quote really says it all, doesn't it? It suggests a sort of functional inclusion, perhaps, but without genuine consultation or agency for the elders themselves.
And what's driving that gap? The study points fingers at technology.
It seems to be a primary driver, yes. We often assume digital tools automatically connect us, but the study suggests they frequently become a battleground between generations.
How so?
Well, a huge majority of youth, 78%, simply assume elders lack interest in adopting new technology. Just assume it.
But the elders see it differently.
Completely differently. 71% of elders say the main obstacle isn't lack of interest, it's the youth's impatience and their lack of support when elders are actually trying to learn.
That's a powerful insight. So it's not just a skill gap, it's really a patience gap.
Precisely. But despite that friction, is there common ground? Did the study find any?
Thankfully, yes. And it seems deeply rooted in emotion, actually. Both generations share a striking anxiety about loneliness, cited by 69% of youth and 68% of elders, almost identical numbers.
That's fascinating. Shared vulnerability.
And they overwhelmingly agree on the solution, too. Spending more quality time together, that was cited by 86% of youth and 84% of elders as the key remedy.
So there's a strong shared desire for connection.
Which shows the resilience, I think, of the family unit. Nearly 9 in 10 youth, 88%, expect to live with family in their old age.
Which aligns closely with the 83% of elders who currently do or plan to, so the aspiration is still there.
But policy needs to support this, right? It's not just about individual families.
Absolutely. Digital inclusion, for example, can't just be about handing out devices. It needs tailored patient learning frameworks built in.
And the study noted a divergence in future plans.
Yes, which was interesting. About 30% of youth are already considering institutional care homes for their own old age, compared to only 19% of current elders who favor that.
So that planning divergence suggests the traditional family structure might face even greater strain in the next generation.
It certainly points that way.
Okay, let's shift gears now, moving to something quite fundamental to the economy: agriculture, and specifically the growing but often largely invisible role of women within it.
Right. This demographic shift is profound. As you see more rural men moving into non-farm jobs, you're left with well, significantly feminized agricultural workforce.
And the numbers are stark.
Women's employment in the sector has surged by 135%. They now make up 42% of the total agricultural workforce. On the surface, that might sound like progress, an economic success story.
But it's not.
But it's really not. And here's the core inequity, the statistic that needs to be, as you said, shouted from the rooftops. Nearly half of these women are classified as unpaid family workers. Unpaid. And that specific number jumped 2.5 times in just 8 years. Think about that. 1 in 3 working women in India today is working essentially for free.
That's shocking.
It is. And the structural barriers ensure this invisibility continues. Women own only about 13 to 14% of land. They earn 20 to 30% less than men for similar work. And they're systemically trapped in the low-value, really laborious tasks.
So it's an economic paradox. More women working, but no rise in the sector's GVA.
Exactly. Their increased labor participation has not translated into higher national gross value added for the sector. Their labor is physically present, yes, but it remains financially invisible.
So how do we bridge that gap? The sources suggest global trade might offer a potential window.
Potentially, yes. For example, trade agreements like the India-UK Free Trade Agreement, they project about a 20% boost in agricultural exports.
Which could open up premium markets.
Right. Premium market access for value chains where women are already heavily employed, things spices, tea, millets.
But the real potential is moving them up the value chain.
Absolutely. The greatest potential for genuine economic empowerment lies in moving women from those low-value farming tasks into the higher margin segments. Processing, packaging, branding. Especially for things like high-demand organic products.
And digital tools have a role here.
Digital tools are essential for formalization. We're seeing some success with AI-enabled multilingual platforms like BXashini and Jugalbandi. These help formalize labor contracts and connect women directly to services. The Odisha Swayam Sampurna farmer producer organizations, the FPOs, are cited as a good example of this in action.
But ultimately, this requires systemic reform, doesn't it? Not just tech fixes.
Oh, completely. At the heart of it, land and labor policies must recognize women as independent farmers, not just extensions of the male head of household or simply unpaid workers.
And that simple change unlocks.
It unlocks crucial access. Access to institutional credit, to insurance, to government support schemes, all things currently denied to many because they lack official ownership or status.
All right, let's execute perhaps the biggest shift of our deep dive now. We're moving from a microeconomic policy right up to the macrocosmic scale of physics.
To the cosmic symphony.
Exactly. Discussing the bass hum of gravitational waves and how we might finally start to hear the missing notes in that symphony.
It's a great analogy. We've really moved from Pythagoras's theoretical music of the spheres to actually detecting these bass notes of the universe.
These subtle wrinkles in space-time?
That's what they are. Incredibly subtle, expanding and contracting wrinkles caused by massive cosmic collisions, merging black holes, neutron stars happening billions of light years away.
And they are incredibly faint by the time they reach us.
So faint. The sources mention they only alter the distance between the Earth and the Moon by less than the diameter of an atom. Tiny.
Which explains why our detectors here on Earth have limitations.
It's precisely why terrestrial observatories like LIGO, Virgo, and Kegarai have a severe handicap. They're mostly sensitive to the higher frequency waves, typically between 100 and 1,000 hertz.
Because of noise on Earth.
Exactly. Seismic noise traffic, ocean waves, earthquakes, you name it, it drowns out the subtler, lower frequency signals. So these ground-based detectors can only really spot signals within about 7 billion light years. We're missing huge chunks of the gravitational sky.
So the solution is to get off Earth. We need to recruit a silent partner, the Moon. Tell us about this Laser Interferometer Lunar Antenna project, LILA.
Right, LILA. It's being led by Vanderbilt Lunar Labs, and the idea is brilliant, really. It's designed to use the Moon's permanently shadowed polar regions as a base for a detector.
Why there specifically?
Because those regions are incredibly cold and stable. As Dr. Karanjani puts it beautifully in the source, gravity is a cosmic rag, and the Moon lets us hear the notes that we cannot hear from any other place.
A cosmic rag, I like that.
Me too. The Moon offers dramatically lower seismic noise compared to Earth, maybe 1,000,000 times less, and it provides a natural vacuum.
Which simplifies the engineering.
Drastically. It reduces the complexity and cost of the infrastructure needed compared to trying to build something similar on Earth or even in free space.
And the timeline. Is this science fiction?
Not entirely. There's a phased approach. Lyell Pioneer could potentially be deployed this decade using existing lunar lander capabilities. Maybe even India's Chandrayaan program could play a role. Lyell Horizon, the full vision, would require astronauts later on.
And I found it fascinating, this side idea mentioned using the Earth-Moon system itself as a detector.
Yeah, monitoring minute deviations in the moon's orbit caused by passing gravitational waves. It essentially turns our entire local system into a giant scientific instrument. Very creative thinking.
But the main scientific jackpot Lyell is chasing is this uncharted territory, right? The decihertz frequency range.
Exactly, that's the key. This decihertz range sits right in the gap between the high-frequency notes LIGO hears and the ultra-low-frequency hum that the future space-based detector ELISA will pick up, probably in the 2030s.
Why are those missing decihertz notes so scientifically vital? What can they tell us?
They are critical for studying something called intermediate mass black holes. These are the missing link black holes. Much bigger than stellar black holes, but smaller than the supermassive ones at galactic centers.
And we think they're important for galaxy formation.
They're believed to be the crucial building blocks. They merge over cosmic time to form those supermassive black holes we see everywhere. If we can't study them directly, which the decihertz range allows, we can't fully understand how galaxies evolve.
So ILA could fill that gap.
OLA, by potentially filling this crucial frequency gap, brings us much closer to hearing the full cosmic symphony, as Dr. Johnny puts it. It could offer genuinely unprecedented insights into the very edge of time and space. It's incredibly exciting.
Okay, from the edge of space, let's bring it right back down to the cutting edge of regulation here on Earth. Specifically, let's unpack the Karnataka High Court's dismissal of X-Corp's petition against India's Sahyog portal.
Right, this is a really significant legal development. A landmark verdict, really, that defines the boundaries or perhaps expands them for state power online in India.
So what is Sahyog, essentially?
Sahyog is a centralized platform. It's operated by the Ministry of Home Affairs, MHA, and the Indian Cybercrime Coordination Center, I4C. Its main purpose is to enforce a specific part of India's IT Act, Section 79(3)(b).
And what does that section do?
In simple terms, it dictates that intermediaries, platforms like X, Google, Meta, Amazon, whoever, lose their safe harbor protection.
Their immunity for user content.
Exactly. Their immunity from liability for user-generated content if they fail to quickly remove content that's deemed unlawful after they receive actual knowledge, basically, a notice from a designated government agency via this Sahyog portal. 38 intermediaries have apparently adopted it already.
Okay, but X called this a censorship portal. What was their core legal argument against it?
Their main argument was that the government was using this Section 79 mechanism, which is about intermediary liability, to effectively bypass the stricter rules and procedural safeguards required under a different section, Section 69A.
Section 69A is the one usually used for blocking orders.
Yes, and it mirrors constitutional restrictions on free speech more closely. It requires things like mandatory hearings for the originator of the content and reasoned written orders before something is taken down. X argued Sahyog lacked these safeguards.
And they pointed to the type of content being flagged?
They did. They noted that about a third of the takedown notices they received via Sahyog targeted posts critical of or related to central government figures like the Prime Minister or the Home Minister.
So what was the government's counter-argument in court?
The government basically argued two main things. First, that Sahyog wasn't creating new powers. It was just operationalizing existing legal obligations under Section 79. Second, and this was crucial legally, they questioned X's very standing to bring the case.
Their standing.
Yes. They argued that X, as a foreign corporation, couldn't invoke the fundamental right to freedom of speech under Article 19 of the Indian Constitution, because that right is reserved specifically for Indian citizens.
And they mentioned international comparisons.
They did. They pointed out, look, X complies with comparable content regulation regimes in the U.S. and the EU, so why resist similar obligations in India?
And how did the High Court rule? Justice Nagaprasanna.
Justice Nagaprasanna sided firmly with the government. He upheld their objection on X's legal standing, stating quite clearly that the protective embrace of Article 19 cannot be invoked by X Corp.
And he endorsed Sahyog itself.
Explicitly. He labeled Sahyog an instrument of public good and delivered a pretty stern warning, noting that India cannot be treated as a playground for information dissemination in defiance of the law.
He also made that comparison to the U.S. Takedown Act.
Yes, he was very pointed about that. He noted that X complies with the U.S. Takedown Act of 2025, which even criminalizes noncompliance, yet they were resisting equivalent obligations here.
But perhaps the most important legal implication is how the court viewed precedent.
Absolutely critical. The court essentially rejected X's reliance on the landmark Shreya Singhal precedent, which had previously read down parts of the IT Act to protect free speech.
Why reject it?
The court stated that the newer 2021 IT rules, under which Sahyog operates, are fresh in their conception and distinct in their design, and therefore require a new interpretive framework, separate from Shreya Singhal.
And the concern there is?
The concern, as experts like Pratik Watra quoted in the article warn, is that this shift, combined with the lack of clear, narrow criteria defining exactly what constitutes unlawful content for Sahyog takedowns, risks enabling an unchecked expansion of state control over political speech and accountability online.
That concept of state control and the technology enabling it brings us neatly to our final segment today. We're transitioning from domestic content control to international export control.
Right, focusing on the Wassenaar arrangement, or WA, and why it seems increasingly obsolete in the cloud era.
So remind us, what is the Wassenaar arrangement?
Okay, so Wassenaar is a really important international agreement. It's a multilateral export control regime, one of the main ones globally. Its job is to control the spread of conventional arms and, crucially, dual-use technologies.
Technologies with both civilian and military applications.
Exactly. And since 2013, that list explicitly includes intrusion software, basically, spyware, and hacking tools.
So what's the problem? Why is it obsolete?
The core problem is simple. Wassenaar was designed decades ago, fundamentally for controlling the export of physical goods, devices, computer chips, tangible hardware you could ship in a box.
And technology has moved on.
Completely. It's just ill-equipped to handle the dynamics of the cloud era. The article uses the example of Microsoft's cloud infrastructure potentially being used for repression, citing the situation in Israel, and how that raises really difficult questions under the current WA framework.
Because it's not a physical export.
Precisely. There's this massive gray area, a loophole, really, around software as a service or SaaS models.
Explain that loophole.
Okay, so with SaaS, a user, maybe in an authoritarian state, isn't installing software locally. They're just remotely invoking functionality, making an API call to a server, perhaps located in a WA member country.
Or getting admin rights to cloud infrastructure.
Right. Does that remote enablement, that granting of access, constitute a controlled export under Wassenaar's old definitions? Currently, the answer is murky at best. WA struggles dramatically with that.
So what needs to change? The sources propose specific reforms.
Yes, the analysis suggests 3 necessary pillars of reform to make WA actually relevant to modern digital surveillance risks. First, the scope itself must expand.
How so?
The control list needs to explicitly include not just software, but also the infrastructure and services that enable large-scale surveillance, citizen profiling, and cross-border data transfers when they're linked to state policing or repression.
Okay, expand the scope. What's second?
Second, we have to fundamentally redefine export. We need to move beyond just thinking about shipping a physical product.
So remote access counts.
Remote enablement, remote authorization, granting administration rights to cloud systems, these need to be treated legally as equivalent to a physical export.
And tied to that.
And critically tied to that, the reform must embed robust end-use controls. That means regulators shouldn't just check if something could be used by a military. They must actively assess the risk of it being used for mass human rights abuses in the destination country.
Okay, scope, definition of export, and use controls. What's the third pillar?
The final pillar is about teeth. The current WA framework is largely voluntary. The suggestion is to shift towards mandatory compliance, ideally through a binding international treaty.
With actual minimum standards.
Yes, mandatory minimum licensing standards for these technologies and, crucially, mandatory export denial when the destination is an atrocity-prone jurisdiction. No ambiguity.
That sounds like a heavy lift. A binding treaty, mandatory denials. Won't powerful states resist?
Oh, absolutely. You'd expect resistance. Arguments about stifling innovation, infringing on national sovereignty. Consensus is always hard to achieve in these multilateral forums.
But is reform still possible?
Pragmatic reform is still possible, yes. And it's already happening to some extent nationally. Some places, like the EU, are already pushing forward with national controls that do treat the transmission of cloud services as potentially dual-use exports.
So there's some momentum.
There's some. The Wassenaar arrangement still holds significant normative weight globally. But, as the source concludes, Until these significant gaps, especially around cloud services and remote access, are properly addressed, its ability to act as a credible shield against the misuse of powerful surveillance technologies remains deeply, deeply undermined. We've navigated today from geopolitical shocks at the UN right through to the deep physics of the cosmos. But it feels like it's all linked by this central theme of control and accountability, especially concerning technology. While we're literally searching the moon, looking for those missing notes of the cosmic symphony that decihertz frequency range for gravitational waves, we really must recognize that perhaps the deepest gaps, the most concerning ones, might be found right here on Earth. Those gaps exist in our global regulatory frameworks, which consistently fail to keep pace with the speed of technological change, whether that's controlling the export of digital surveillance tools through an obsolete Wassenaar arrangement, or defining the boundaries of digital speech and state power via domestic portals like Sahyog. The fundamental challenge for the future, it seems, isn't just about discovery, whether cosmic or technological. It's about control, ensuring that these powerful tools actually serve humanity, and not the other way around.
Thank you for listening. If you want to provide suggestions, please contact on the Twitter handle given in the episode description. As always, we are eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day.